pick up to you, Kanwal Sibal, as you see those images playing out of the two leaders, US President Joe Biden and India's Prime Minister. Lots has been on the menu. There's been talk of furthering business relationships. There's been talk of the nuclear reactors that are to be set up in India, taking forward the nuclear agreement. How do you perceive it? What is for you the biggest takeaway from the manner in which Indo-US relations now seem to be at another level?
I think the defining moment in Prime Minister's tenure in terms of relations with the United States was his state visit to the United States, which just took place a few months ago. And there, all the very substantive aspects of our relationship were discussed. Whether it is defense relationship, which is centered around the GE 414 engine, or the Reaper drones, or in general beefing up India's military capacity with US technology wherever it's possible in terms of joint development, manufacturing, what have you. That's one aspect, which is very important. It'll take a lot of time to translate it into concrete programs because lots of issues are involved. Lots of clearances have to be obtained from the United States Congress in particular, because the administrative complexities on the US side and the legislative complexities are pretty difficult. That is one aspect. The other is the whole thing of ICET, the critical and emerging technologies, on which the initiative was taken by the two national security advisors. The business community is involved, the academic community is involved. So that is going forward going to be very, very critical. As part of this, the semiconductor manufacturing potential in India, in which the United States companies hopefully would come forward and invest in India. There are some indications that one or two companies are willing to do so. This will be a game changer because India needs to develop independent capacity, and United States seeks to move away from dependence on China. Then there is climate issues, climate financing, energy transition, and renewable energy. So there are a whole lot.
I'm just going to stop you, Mr. Sibal, for a moment, because we are getting news from an American statement that's come out where the two leaders have said our friendship will further global good. The meeting with Prime Minister Modi has been extremely productive, says the US President, and people-to-people linkages and talks on economic linkages have been furthered. Mr. Russo joining me there from Washington. When you hear these words, is this music to your ears that you've got two countries who seem to have forged a stable relationship that cuts across, in the US, the Democratic-Republican divide, and dare I say in India, the divide between Prime Minister Modi, the BJP, and the opposition?
Yeah, it certainly does. Since Prime Minister Modi was elected, and even before that, defense relations have really been integral to what our governments have been trying to do together. In recent years, our shared concern about over-reliance on China for the development of critical and emerging technologies has been able to, I think, provide an important new linkage, which you saw reflected quite substantially in the joint statement after the June summit. But the June summit also reflected, as you rightly point out, an area which I think had really underperformed in the government lane, which is our commercial relationship. Yeah, the numbers showed that trade and investment were growing, but for the most part, our governments were fighting each other rather than finding ways to cooperate. And we really started to see some breakthroughs in June, resolving 6 WTO disputes and finding other avenues to begin knitting our private sectors together. Obviously, India is one of the fastest growing large economies in the world. The United States still has a healthy growth rate for a large economy. There's so much more that we can do together, particularly manufacturing. And it's good to see that element get on track too. So very warmly received, expanding the relationship and hitting areas which have been weaknesses before.
How much of that, though, Mr. Russo, is driven by the fact that there is this common desire to contain an expansionist China?
A good measure of it is. I think the first belief of a U.S. administration, if we're going to convince companies to draw down how much they're investing in China, we'd like to see them come back home. But this concept of friendshoring, which sometimes get laughed at a bit, but you've actually seen the Biden administration put real dollars on the table to try to encourage companies, if they're not going to come back to the United States to rebuild manufacturing, will they go to friendly nations, including India? And as Secretary Sybil noticed, our cooperation in climate change, indicative of that would be the $500 million loan we gave to a U.S. company, First Solar, to start putting solar manufacturing in India. So, some of that may be going to U.S. companies, but the jobs that are being created and the climate mitigation steps are going to be resident there in India, which is inherently a good thing for all of our countries. So they're finding those unique ways where both sides will benefit.